Have you ever thought that you healed something or you changed your mindset about something, but then something activated you and then you were pulled back into old feelings or old behavioral reactions that you thought that you already outgrew? Do you sometimes feel frustrated that you seem to be stuck in the same thought patterns or emotional patterns despite doing years of inner work? Or do you ever feel like no matter how many times you tell yourself that you have changed, you still get angry or overwhelmed or feel defeated when life becomes challenging and stressful? So many people think that changing their mindset is purely psychological work, that changing your beliefs means saying positive affirmations all day or meditating or going to therapy. And most people think that beliefs are just thoughts or internal scripts or internal stories that they've been repeating to themselves for years or likely decades. And that's why so many of the tools that we've been taught to use for changing beliefs are entirely mental and mindset oriented. But what most people don't understand is that beliefs don't simply just live in your mind. They also live in your body. Every single belief you carry, whether it's an empowering belief or a wounded, limiting belief, isn't just a thought running through your brain. It's actually an embodied pattern stored in your nervous system, your fascia, your cells, and even your subtle energy field. Welcome to The Simple Source, a paradigm-shifting space where self-love, healing, spirituality, and personal growth are redefined. If you've been told healing takes years, that abundance must be attracted, or that transformation requires struggle, you haven't been told the truth. I'm Linda Valines, a certified trauma-informed holistic coach, author, and spiritual guide. After healing myself from chronic conditions, complex trauma, and lack, not by following traditional frameworks, but by creating my own, I'm now teaching you to love, heal, and free yourself, mind, body, and soul, so you can reclaim your highest health, happiness, and potential with joy and ease. Each week, we go beyond surface-level self-help and into the real mechanics of transformation. If the traditional paths to healing and spirituality haven't produced the changes you want in the life you desire, you're in the right place. You were never meant to struggle or wait for what is already yours. Let's get started with today's episode. So if you grew up in a family dynamic where your authentic self was not celebrated, but rather criticized, then you probably developed the belief that I'm not safe to be myself. And so that belief isn't just subconscious or conscious even, it's a part of your physiology because it makes your shoulders curl forward when you feel seen as your authentic self. It makes your chest collapse slightly to protect your heart. It makes your diaphragm hold tension, like making your breath shallow. And because your nervous system was trained to be on high alert, when your authentic self was threatened, it's scanning for danger in association with that belief. So that belief isn't just a thought floating around in your brain. It became a physical reality your body has been repeating for years and likely decades. So when people try to reprogram beliefs using only cognitive tools like telling themselves affirmations or other mindset practices, they are essentially like only tackling the mental code while leaving the physical code running in the background. And that's why healing is a struggle for so many people. You know, your conscious mind believes one thing, which is, I want to be loved as my authentic self. But your subconscious mind believes another thing, which is, it's not safe to be my authentic self. And your subconscious controls the majority of how your body functions. And what people don't understand and neglect to integrate in their healing is that your body reinforces what your subconscious mind believes, which means that you can say conscious affirmations all day long, but your nervous system is operating from that wounded subconscious belief that you are not safe. And that means that there is no mental coherence, no physical mind-body coherence, only conflict, which then means that true transformation is at an impasse. So that's what we're going to discuss in today's episode, how beliefs are not just thoughts you think, but they are actually physiological and biological states that your entire system repeats as a pattern. And then that's what your reality reflects. And you're also going to learn that true lasting belief transformation can't just be isolated to mindset work. It has to include your body. It must also include somatic release, because true transformation requires restoration of your coherence across all layers: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, behavioral, inherited, temporal. That's your whole field. I did a whole episode about that recently. But before we get into how the body holds beliefs, how somatic practices release the emotional imprints attached to them, and why you can't just fully reprogram your beliefs without working with your body, I want to share a little bit about why I wanted to do this episode. So if you've listened to the past few episodes, you know that I recently experienced a severe traumatic event where all my repressed childhood sexual abuse and suppressed childhood fears surfaced at the same time in relationship. It was horrifying and so deeply disturbing, but I have actually holistically healed very quickly, very productively. So my post-traumatic stress symptoms right after the trauma were like at a 10 because I had to sleep with the lights on in my house due to the hypervigilance and residual fears. And now, 7 weeks later, post-event, my post-traumatic stress symptoms are like barely at a 1, meaning I barely experience any post-traumatic symptoms at all, any hypervigilance. And if any hypervigilance does surface, which is the only symptom that does surface at this point, I can immediately resolve it, release it, return to peace, clarity, and regulation very quickly. And one of the reasons that I have healed so quickly, so productively, in such a short amount of time is largely because I have prioritized somatic healing. So I do 15 minutes of somatic exercises every single night. I've done that for 7 weeks now. And what I've started to do is I take hikes. I live in a very bucolic mountainous area. And so I take hikes often. And on my hikes, I've started to integrate somatic release. And I've learned that that alone is like one of the most powerful somatic practices that you can do that I have ever done. So what I've been doing is I'm using the exertion of the hike to allow my body to fully release the physiological imprints of the beliefs and the emotions associated with that trauma by stomping my feet, by shaking my arms and releasing my jaw, sighing, yawning, crying, and humming while I literally say to myself and my body, I release the anger of being violated. I release the anger of this and that, and I'm safe in my body, or whatever it is that I'm healing at the moment. And I send all of that energy to the earth. And definitely that means I look a little unhinged. That's probably what you're thinking. Linda, you're doing all that on a hike. Maybe there are other people around. There are definitely other people around. But I do not give a shit because I'm healing. And healing in a public space is neither here nor there. Healing is healing. And there's also something like actually more healing about not giving any fucks that someone is like seeing my healing. I don't care anymore. Actually, you send out a newsletter to my audience about that, where I've become that person who's like hugging themselves and talking to my inner child in public is I don't give a fuck. I prioritize my healing. And so I've released so much of the fear and the traumatic imprints on these somatic release hikes that I've been able to go from a 10 to a 1 in 6 weeks, in terms of my post-traumatic stress symptoms. And so that's the power of somatic release and healing, particularly healing trauma, because healing is really all connected to beliefs. We naturally form beliefs over time, and beliefs are, by definition, what we deem to be true, regardless of whether those beliefs are objectively true, if they're limiting or liberating. And so that means our beliefs largely determine our experiential reality. And because that's what our reticular activating system uses, and that's a part of your brain that literally filters your reality based on your beliefs. And so the beliefs that you hold that are limiting, that are rooted in trauma, rooted in fear, not in your highest self or authentic truths, those beliefs aren't just like trapped in your brain. They do reside. They're a part of your biology and physiology. They're in your body. And that fact is something that I have personally experienced and learned to prioritize in my own healing practice in the last year. And it's made such a tremendous difference. And so many people get stuck trying to change their beliefs with only cognitive tools like affirmations, reframing stories, mindset shifts, talk therapy. Those are important and valuable, but by themselves, they only scratch the surface. They cannot really truly overwrite your subconscious patterning. You're just stuck in your conscious mind. And that's why you continue to struggle with the same problems, because you haven't necessarily penetrated your subconscious and thus your body, where that original program still resides and is looping. And so that means you can repeat, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe all day long, every single day. But if your diaphragm is locked in chronic tension, if your breathing is chronically shallow, if your nervous system is still constantly primed for danger, that means your body is living in the opposing condition to I am safe, right? It's actually living in the condition of I am unsafe. So that means you're saying one thing with your conscious mind while your body, your subconscious reflection, is screaming another thing. You have to understand that your body always displays the primary truth because it is, again, largely under the command of your autonomic nervous system, which is controlled by your subconscious, which is your most primal system. So that's why cognitive work without somatic practices and release is often very short-lived or very unproductive and feels like an uphill battle, like a struggle. Holistic healing and reprogramming truly requires 3 different layers working simultaneously in harmony. There's top down, right? Mind to body, bottom up, which is body to mind, and field level, which is your level of coherence. Again, top down is the cognitive work, the mindset work, the conscious awareness, all of the mental rehearsal, the affirmations, that's top down. Bottom up is the somatic stuff. It's your body unwinding. It's your nervous system becoming regulated. It's emotional release. And again, field level is your level of coherence, right? The overall energetic state and resonance you hold from your collective mind, body, soul alignment or lack of alignment, which determines the signals that your cells are reading and responding to. So when those 3 align, mind, body, and field, you don't just think differently. You literally are like different on a cellular level because your mind isn't just thinking differently, but your body is functioning and operating differently because your nervous system has relaxed into safety. And that means that you are like mind-body coherent, and that means that your cells are then reading a cleaner, more resonant signal. And so, of course, like your posture, your breath, your emotions, your energy all begin to align with the same coherent truth, which is that you are safe. The trauma is over. And that's what lasting healing and reprogramming fundamentally require. So true transformation isn't about forcing your mind to think positive or layering new thoughts on top of old wounded beliefs and imprints and unresolved traumas and fears. It's about creating alignment across every single layer of your being, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, inherited, behavioral. All of that is your energetic field. And so when all of you is coherent, your wounded beliefs don't just change, they dissolve and you become like literally less dense, which means you are lighter because you are freer. And that means that you can then live from your highest truths more easily, more readily, more joyfully. So now let's start breaking down the science of how beliefs actually get stored, not just in your mind, but through your body, so that you really, truly understand the value of somatic practices and healing. Because when you understand how your beliefs aren't just like mental, but physical, it becomes obvious why you have to incorporate somatic release into your healing. It really is non-negotiable if you want to heal and transform at the deepest and most holistic level. So first, let's just go from a very basic neuroscience perspective. Beliefs are just patterns of neural activity in the brain. But neuroscience also confirms that bodily responses encode experiences, meaning your body actually mirrors or expresses those neural circuits via your nervous system. So let's break that down, okay? That means repeated experiences, minor or significant, as long as they're repeated, create strong neural patterns in your brain. You probably heard the term neurons that fire together wire together. And so those circuits then become primary pathways for how you think, feel, behave, and interpret your world. And so each time a neural pattern fires, it also then engages your autonomic nervous system. Of course it does. That's your natural design, which then means your muscle tone, your breathing patterns, and even your connective tissues are also engaged, involved. And then your amygdala then flags the emotional charge. Your spinal reflexes then engage your posture, your movement, then your fascia and your muscles, where all that stored tension also get engaged. And then your epigenetic switches respond to those stress hormones. And then gradually over time, through repetition, bias how your body functions at a cellular level. So in short, what I'm saying is mentally, emotionally, even your posture, your chemistry, your tissues are actually all part of the programming of a belief. And that's how a belief becomes your lived physiology. So because of that holistic pattern storage, you can actually intellectually decide to change a belief, by repeating new mantras, affirmations, even feeling like motivated, perhaps for a few days. But then all of a sudden you get activated again by something, someone, and then that old programming kicks in because your body is still operating from that conditioning, from that patterned belief. And so that's not because something is wrong with you. That's not because your subconscious mind is like broken. That's just your body trying to keep you safe according to its primary programming. And so that's why true healing, lasting healing, productive healing, that's what I mean by that, must be holistic, which means you can't just talk your way out of trauma and your past pains. You have to move. You have to release those beliefs, those emotional imprints from your body through somatic practices. You have to change your own biology and physiology. And when you do that, that's when you can more productively rewire your brain, because then you've created greater ease of neuroplasticity because your body isn't stuck, isn't conflicting with your mental programming. And that's how you create space for your nervous system to then slow down its reactivity, meaning start to recondition itself out of survival states and for your hormonal flares to settle. So again, a belief isn't just like a thought floating around in your head. It's actually a whole mind-body system occurrence and programming and pattern that happens when something's repeated or conditioned throughout your life. And when that repetition is combined with emotional intensity and a specific physiological state, that becomes hardwired programming. And so that combination, the thought, the belief, the emotion, and the bodily response, that's the neural circuit. And so every time you repeat that combination, that circuit, that programming just gets stronger and stronger. And so over time, that's what your life is, It's just that pattern showing itself over and over and over again. And once that pattern is wired, your brain doesn't separate it from the emotion or the body. They're all linked together. It's part of the same programming. So that's why when you're activated, you don't just have a thought, you have a whole full body experience that is associated with that belief. That's the full reaction. And so let's get a little more nuanced about your nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system has one primary job, and that is to keep you safe. And so it categorizes your world, your experiences moment by moment in terms of safe or dangerous. That innate function, that innate programming of your nervous system does shape your experience about what is even possible. So if you grew up in an environment where love was conditional or unpredictable or stressful, your nervous system encoded that connection and love is dangerous or unsafe. And so that became a core belief in your subconscious. That's not a conscious thing that you probably walk around thinking, love is unsafe, love is unsafe. But you experience that in every single facet of your life because it's a core belief. It's a subconscious programming, meaning it's not just in your mind, but it's also in your body. And so unresolved trauma especially hardwires wounded beliefs into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn patterns. And until those patterns are discharged, released from your body, your nervous system is still going to keep running that same programming, no matter how many affirmations you say, because your nervous system hasn't completed the stress cycle. It doesn't understand that the danger is over because, again, like the body hasn't experienced the release and safety. So there's a ton of growing evidence that tension, like physical tension, correlates with emotional and behavioral patterns. So your fascia is the incredible web of connective tissue that literally wraps around and through every muscle, organ, and bone in your body. And it's not just structural, it's sensory, meaning it holds memory. And so chronic muscle tension and fascial binding and facial binding are, of course, associated with beliefs. For example, if deep down, meaning on a subconscious level, you carry the belief, I'm unworthy, then your posture will unconsciously collapse forward often. You may hold your chest like sort of caved in unconsciously. You may have very shallow breathing because your body continues to represent that belief long after you've stopped consciously thinking about it. That's why so many people can intellectually say, I know that I'm enough. Like, I understand that I am good enough. But their body is actually braced in a posture of unworthiness and unlovability. Now, in terms of epigenetics, which is the science of gene expression, the science there shows that emotional states and belief-driven stress can literally turn your genes on or off. So in other words, your biology gets programmed by the beliefs that you harbor. And Bruce Lipton actually wrote an incredible book called The Biology of Belief that goes real deep into this that I highly recommend. It's such a good book. If you haven't read it, you should read it. So if you have a belief that, the world isn't safe because your childhood was very stressful, chaotic, etc., then your stress response then probably keeps your cortisol levels like chronically elevated, which then changes how your genes express. So then, of course, over time, with chronically elevated cortisol levels, your entire mind-body system suffers, like literally suffers, because your digestion is chronically compromised, which means your immune system is chronically compromised. Your hormones are out of balance, and then your longevity gets shortened because you're living in chronic systemic high inflammation. So beliefs aren't just psychological, they are like truly inherently biological. And if we go deeper into quantum biology, which again, Bruce Lipton brilliantly covers in his book, there's an even larger connection, which is basically that every cell in your body is constantly reading your field. And so your field is this, again, the sum like total of your coherence or your lack of coherence or incoherence. Again, I did a whole episode about what true coherence is. So if you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. But essentially, coherence is mind, body, soul, and energetic harmony and alignment with your authentic highest self. And so when you are coherent, your perception and your beliefs are coherent, which means your energy is coherent, which means your cells are reading a coherent and not a chaotic field because you're resonating clearly without distortion and density. So when you're holding on to limiting wounded beliefs, the incoherence of those patterns, because they are rooted in fear, stress, and unresolved trauma, that incoherence is a part of your overall field that your cells are like literally listening to and responding to. That means your beliefs do determine the signals that your biology reacts to. And that means like, of course, that determines the possibilities that your system is available for, meaning your whole reality that you exist in. And so if we put all of that together, what I hope you understand is that beliefs are not just isolated thoughts. They are networks of neurons and nervous system states and muscle contractions and fascial patterns, gene expressions, cellular operation, and like your literal field level resonance and frequencies. Beliefs live everywhere in you. They're a part of all of you, mind, body, and energy, which means when you try to reprogram a belief purely through mental effort, you're only affecting one part of a much bigger holistic system. And that's why I have at least one somatic exercise in every single workshop and course in my program. Every single one. There's at least one somatic exercise because mental healing is only one part of the whole. So beliefs are embodied. They're not just mental. And if you want to transform a wounded belief, your body has to be included in that process as well as emotional release because every belief is associated with an emotion. So every belief we hold doesn't just exist as like a thought in the mind. It carries an emotional signature that anchors it into the body. And so that emotion is actually the glue that makes beliefs so sticky, so to speak. For example, if you hold the belief, it's not safe to be seen. That belief isn't just a mental fear. It's, again, a whole body experience because that fear tightens your gut. It makes your diaphragm contract, meaning it's harder for you to take a full breath. Your throat probably feels constricted, right? As if it's dangerous to speak. Your limbs probably feel heavy and you definitely are contracting. And then over time, those physical reactions become the actual body language of that belief. And so your body then keeps performing or reinforcing that belief, even if your conscious mind tries to reprogram it or release it through just affirmations, because that emotional signature has not been recognized, has not been released. That glue has not been unstuck. And that's why so many people feel frustrated when they try to change beliefs with mindset work and mental reframes. Again, you can repeat, I'm safe to be seen like 100 times, but if your nervous system is still firing from fear, if your gut is still clenched, if you're still holding your breath, if you're still constricted in your throat, your body is just replaying the unsafe pattern over and over and over again, even though your conscious mind is trying to override it. Your whole mind-body system is in conflict. And that's why you struggle to heal. And that's why your reality is stuck in the same patterns and problems. Cognitive reframes can be very powerful, of course. They focus your conscious mind, they introduce possibility, but without physically releasing the biological imprint and the emotional charge that's holding that belief in place in your body, that mindset reframe is actually just wallpapering, is really what it is, because it doesn't actually penetrate anything deeper than your mind. And neuroscience confirms that, when emotions are attached to a memory or a belief, that's what makes the pattern of the belief sticky, because your amygdala, the part of your brain that encodes emotional memories, actually tags certain experiences as significant, the ones that are tied to survival, the ones that are repeated with a very strong emotional charge. And so once a belief is tied to a strong emotion and has been tagged as significant, then your body, your nervous system is just going to keep replaying it. That becomes an emotional baseline for you. So I'm saying all of this, but you have to keep in mind that all of this is happening, but your body is not like betraying you when this is happening. It's actually protecting you. It's your body saying, I remember what kept us safe once. I remember the danger, and I'm trying to keep you safe again. But the issue is those protective mechanisms eventually become prisons because you're not like living in the past anymore. You're living in the present. Your traumas are over. Your past pains are over. But your body has not received that message clearly, productively, and holistically. But it does get that message when the emotional charge, the emotional imprint is released and the biological patterning is released. That's when your body's going to stop gripping onto that belief as relevant, as significant, as true. So the question isn't like, how do I think differently? The larger question is actually, how do I align my mental healing with the appropriate release of the emotional charge so that my body is free to embrace a new empowering belief? That's actually the question that you should be asking yourself. And that's where somatic practices come in. And that's exactly why I have so many of them throughout my program. Because you have to become coherent to heal. That means you have to master your mind, your body, and your soul equally. You can't just force yourself to think positive and heal. You have to safely unwind the felt sense of that wounded belief, that old belief in your body as well. That means the fear in your gut, the contraction in your heart space and your chest, right? The constriction that you feel in your throat, so that the emotional glue imprint baseline starts to dissolve. And your nervous system then understands that belief no longer has value. It's not significant anymore. It loses its power then. And that's when you can really start to transform your whole mind, body, soul system. So now let's talk about what somatic practices really are and what they do. So somatic practice is basically any body-centric practice that uses awareness of physical sensations, of movement, of breath to regulate your nervous system, to release stored emotions and tensions and trauma for the purpose of healing and integration of your mind and body. That's a pretty inclusive definition of what a somatic practice is. So the first thing that somatic practices do is they allow your nervous system to discharge survival energy. This is so key. They help tell your body that the trauma and the stress are over. People don't understand that is like one of the first things that you have to do when you heal trauma. Like you literally have to tell your whole mind body system the trauma is over, and you have to do that in a way that is productive. And that means like somatically. So when something happens that's very overwhelming to your nervous system, particularly trauma, I mean, that's basically the definition of trauma. Your system can't complete its natural fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response because you were overwhelmed. And that incomplete survival energy basically gets stuck because it's not complete, meaning it's just like ongoing. It keeps looping. And so then the belief attached to that event, that stress, that trauma also keeps looping because, again, as we have discussed, the mind and the body are like deeply interconnected. And so somatic practices, somatic exercises like shaking, rocking, and other types of intentional movement, they give your body a chance to release that stuck survival energy and to complete the stress cycle. And so once that survival loop is completed, then the belief loses its glue, its anchor, because your body is no longer functioning under the belief that you are in danger. Now, the second thing that somatic practices do is they unravel the holding patterns that literally live in your muscles and harden your fascia. So if a belief has like kept you bracing and you're collapsed or you've been tight and tense for years, then gentle movement and breath work and body awareness start to then soften or loosen those patterns and those imprints. So imagine a chest that's been collapsed around the belief of I'm not worthy. With breath work and with body awareness, that chest begins to open, to expand, to repattern itself, which then means the body starts encoding a new message of safety, of worthiness, without the mind necessarily needing to consciously force that belief. And so the third thing that somatic practices do is they help you access implicit memory. So implicit memory is like the automatic, unconscious, and long-term memory that's formed from conditioning and associated with felt sensations. Now, this is a very important thing because so many of the beliefs that run our lives were formed before we even had language. So that's why you don't need to remember everything or recall every single detail of a traumatic event in order to heal. I did a whole episode about that you should listen to if you haven't listened to it yet. But simply by following your body's sensations, your felt sensations during somatic practices, you can access and release like memories that have been stored in your body that your conscious mind doesn't remember. This is so key because so many people don't remember their past traumas or the details of their past traumas. And that's totally fine because your body remembers. And that takes me to the fourth thing that somatic practices do. They facilitate emotional release. It's so common during a somatic session while shaking or stretching, rocking, sighing, to unexpectedly start crying. And that's not random. It's actually the point and very productive, deeply healing, because it's your body letting go of those stagnant, stored, suppressed, repressed, denied emotions. And that physical and emotional release is your nervous system's way of saying, oh, I can breathe. The trauma is over. I can stop bracing. The charge is gone. We don't have to keep holding on to this anger, this fear, this belief anymore. And finally, all of that naturally restores coherence. When your nervous system reorganizes naturally through somatic release, the energetic and physiological grip of that outdated belief really does start to dissolve because you're in a new open state. You're no longer operating in survival. You're operating from a new felt sense of safety. And so new patterns can then emerge, meaning your brain can then literally create new neural pathways and new neural circuits, ones that are rooted in truth instead of trauma. And that's when coherence becomes possible and holistically embodied. So nightly somatic practices and often daily emotional releases earlier this year was how I became so coherent, and why I then experienced like a massive spiritual up level and shifted timelines over 25 times in 3 months alone. And now I can spontaneously, without studying, without training, I can see over 25 different types of energy and pre-energy. I can see the quantum field with my eyes open and my eyes closed. I can hear frequencies and sounds beyond the normal human auditory range. I can feel and direct subtle energies all around me. All of that happened without me forcing, trying, willing. It just spontaneously, joyously happened because I became so fucking coherent, because I released so much density, so much stagnation in my mind, body, soul system. I did a whole episode about that whole experience called Why I Stopped Manifesting and my 4-month quantum shift, that it goes into detail about that you should listen to if you haven't yet. But it really goes into the power of emotional release and healing beliefs and distortions in order to become coherent, and what happens naturally when you do. So somatic practices are not about like fixing your beliefs or fixing something broken about you, because A, you're not broken, and B, you don't need to be fixed. You are already whole and perfect exactly as you are right now. It's about giving your body the conditions it needs to complete cycles of stress, to release unresolved trauma, and to let go of outdated protections and projections, and start reorganizing itself around coherence and harmony. And when that happens, beliefs don't just change in your mind, they actually repattern at every level of your being, including on a cellular level. And then that's when healing stops being a struggle. So releasing wounded, outdated beliefs isn't just therapeutic work. It's really a radical reclamation of your sovereignty. When a belief lives unconsciously in your nervous system for decades, that affects your daily posture, the way that you breathe on a daily basis, your emotional reflexes every day. It really does run your life in the background. That's why you self-sabotage despite wanting change. That's why you put so much effort, why you struggle so much and nothing changes. You might think that you're making different choices, but those choices are actually being countered by deep programming living in your body that were often written long before you had like conscious language or personal agency. So when you intentionally and productively and consistently release those imprints, you then get to reclaim authorship of your own experience. And that's when you stop needlessly suffering and struggling, because you have reclaimed your sovereignty, like mind and body and soul. So if you're operating from a wounded, outdated belief, like I'm not worthy, your energy, your decisions are unconsciously going to project that story. Like no matter how many affirmations like you say, because your nervous system is in constriction mode. That means you're going to shrink when you want to actually expand. You will apologize when you want to assert. You're going to settle when you actually want more. Again, because your nervous system and your body are actually still hijacked by unresolved stress, fears, and trauma, regardless of what your conscious mind wants. So as somatic practices, somatic release allow those cycles to be completed and those patterns to unwind. And that's when your body no longer reflexively reenacts that old programming. That's when you stop becoming a passenger on that tired, endless roller coaster of ups and downs, and then you actually get to step back into the driver's seat of your life. And only then can you actually steer your life and start living your highest timeline, because you're then in the driver's seat. Your body is actually the platform through which you experience your reality. Your consciousness can be everywhere, but it's your body that anchors you into this reality in this life. So that means your nervous system and your mind and your body and your soul system, they have to become coherent in order for you to experience a more peaceful, a more healed, a more empowered reality. And that means that your beliefs must fundamentally be aligned with your highest self. And when they are, you're going to experience your whole posture, your emotional baseline, the way that you breathe, your mindset are naturally then going to be more easily aligned with your highest self as well, because your biology has started to respond to a different set of instructions and signals and field level coherence. And that's what I explain in that episode about, why I stopped manifesting and my quantum shift afterwards. It happens naturally. I did not force all of these multidimensional abilities. It just happened spontaneously because I became so coherent. And you have to understand that your mind, your body, your soul naturally want to live and exist in harmony. That is your natural design. So many people think that healing is just a mental thing. And so many people neglect their bodies and their healing process. Or on the other hand, it's just all about body, right? Diet and exercise and vanity, which isn't healing. The pendulum swings the other way. But true healing it must be and is innately holistic. And it fundamentally requires coherence. And when you become coherent, you become available to possibilities that were literally filtered out of your reality before because you were not resonant with those possibilities. Experiences that once seemed impossible, then actually become natural for you, flow to you. And that's when you shift timelines faster. That's when you heal easier, not because something mystical happened outside of you, but because your embodied mind, body, soul state opened you to a new field of possibilities because your own field became more coherent. That's not just woo-woo, that is science. Nervous system regulation has proven to change hormone balance, immune function, how your brain and your body literally filter information. And again, quantum biology and also systems science show that coherent states in a system actually increases the range of adaptive responses that are available to it. So a lot of people think that spiritual awakening doesn't actually include the body, right? It's just your consciousness is enlightened. But it must absolutely include nervous system somatic coherence. To be spiritually awakened or enlightened does not mean to be above the human body, but rather you have to bring all aspects of your human and spiritual self into alignment with your highest truths. And that includes your body. The highest spiritual work that we can do is not bypassing embodiment. It is actually radical embodiment. And that radical embodiment is when you bring the body into alignment with your highest self and harmony and integrity. And that's why I have a whole soul section in my program, because you can't truly be your whole authentic self if you're not attuned to your whole self. And that includes your soul, your spirit. And you can't truly be spiritually awakened in a body that is stuck in human trauma. You have to liberate your body in order to liberate your spirit. And so I hope that has convinced you to really prioritize somatic release and somatic practices in your own healing, in your own effort to shift your reality and embrace productive and easeful transformation. because so many people are stuck in their heads and they're so disconnected from their bodies. But our bodies are like literally the vehicle and vessels for our experience in this reality. And we have to respect that. And so many people disrespect their bodies. They take advantage of their bodies. They don't understand that their bodies and their minds are like intimately connected. And they must live in harmony in order for your life to be in harmony. So here's your action step for the week. I want you to try a version of my somatic release hikes. So if you can take a hike, awesome. If you can't take a hike, just take a walk in nature or somewhere in a park with some trees and some greenery. So when you have adequately warmed up your body after a few minutes of walking or hiking, I want you to recall the last thing that made you angry or frustrated. And I want you to let that feeling arise naturally without forcing it, but just simply giving it space to be in your body, to be acknowledged, and to be released. And then I want you to start stomping as you step, and then say to yourself, to your body, to the nature around you, that you release the anger about that situation. And I want you to get really specific about what you're angry about. Like, be brutally honest with yourself. That means you have to be vulnerable with yourself about what needs you had that were not met. That's actually at the root of your anger. What boundaries were crossed. And try not to blame anyone, because that's not healing, that's blaming. It's just focus on what you wanted to happen, what you needed, and what you didn't receive, or what boundaries are crossed. And again, with each step, stomp, right? You're stomping each step because you're releasing that anger, you're releasing that frustration, you're releasing that energy. You're literally letting it go and giving it to the ground, to the earth. And I want you to feel it move out of your legs, through the soles of your feet, through the earth, regardless of whatever surface you're walking or hiking on. And also then say to yourself, I release the belief that, and say whatever wounded belief that comes up that's associated with that anger, with that frustration. And it's automatically going to come to you. You got to trust your body wisdom. Like, your body's going to be like, yep, that's the belief that's associated with the anger. And keep stomping. And if you don't give any fucks about anybody seeing you, which I hope you don't, because it doesn't matter. Again, your healing is like priority here. Start shaking your arms out, right? Get your whole body involved, so stomp and then shake your arms at the same time while you repeat, I release the anger about blank. I release the belief that blank, whatever is appropriate for you. And like literally feel all of that move out of your body into the ground beneath you. And if you want to run for like a minute with the intention of release, like high intensity release, not exercise, because that's a different energetic altogether, but like true emotional release, belief release, you can do that for a minute too. But you just want to really let your body like let go of that emotion, let go of that physical imprint, let go of that belief. And if you feel like crying, which you probably will, like, don't be surprised if you do, please let yourself cry. Like, that's a massive physical release too. And you'll probably also want to like sigh or yawn. So do that as well. And then you're going to feel in your body when that emotion has been like thoroughly released, when that physical imprint of that belief has loosened, has dissolved. And if not completely, then at least like significantly. And that's when you can start to settle, right? Slow down, breathe more deeply, start to regulate yourself. And I want you to put both hands on your heart, take a deep, long breath from your belly, and then tell yourself you are loved, you are safe, you are free. And then enjoy the rest of your hike or your walk. I've come to crave my somatic release hikes. I do them at least once a week. And every time afterward, I feel lighter, I feel more empowered, I feel more embodied as my true, authentic, highest self, and certainly more sovereign in my reality, more clear, more present. And it's because I have loved myself thoroughly. That's really at the root of what that is. Not only have I communed with nature, which is an extension of me, but I have connected to my energy through my body. And in doing so, I have reminded myself that I am in control of my soul's vessel in this life. I'm reminded that my body is powerful, that my body is wise, and my body will always choose freedom when I remind it that it can be free. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope this episode awakened you, inspired you, and reminded you of what's possible when you love, heal, and free yourself and reclaim your highest truth and power. If this show has transformed or enlightened your self-love, growth, and healing journey, please like, save, and share this episode and leave a positive review on Apple or Spotify. And subscribe to be reminded of new episodes. Your support is deeply appreciated and truly helps this show so much. And if today's episode resonated with you, don't stop here. Go deeper. My book, Unconditional, You Are Perfect As You Are, expands on these teachings and gives you the missing framework about self-love that no one is talking about. So get your copy today to start reading and loving yourself more. And if you're ready for the ultimate healing journey with daily instruction and guidance from me, I'd love to see you inside the Source membership, the only holistic and comprehensive step-by-step self-healing program that is proven to work. Remember, you were never meant to struggle or wait for what is already yours. It's time to claim everything you want and more. All the links are in the show notes. I'll see you next time.